Good.
45 minutes. All right. Um, a bit of a follow-up to the discussion that we had about the MIT subway study last time. With regard to routes of transmission, the subway study, as those of you who tuned in last time will remember, suggested that subways being quite packed even after shelter-in-place orders came down in New York City seemed to be a major route of transmission for SARS-CoV-2 in New York City. Well, there's a paper out called Indoor Transmission of SARS-CoV-2, Xiaohong et al. 2020, which suggests that indoor transmission is far more likely than outdoor. And at one level, that seems completely obvious. And yet also the shutting down of parks and of beaches and of skate parks and the admonition that when people are walking outside, they have to be wearing masks, all strike me as suggestive that people do not have a nuanced enough model here. That, this stay 6 feet away from one another has from the beginning struck me as an insane number. It's clearly not enough, but it's better than nothing. And the mask yourself at all times. Well, we don't mask ourselves in our house in case some virus happens to come in the window. So there are going to be nuances with regard to what is the best move. So from the discussion of this paper, again, Xiaohong et al. 2020, here's a direct quote. Our study does not rule out outdoor transmission of the virus. However, among our 7,324 identified cases in China with sufficient descriptions, only one outdoor outbreak involving 2 cases occurred in a village in Shanghu, Henan. A 27-year-old man had a conversation outdoors with an individual who returned from Wuhan on the 25th of January and had the onset of symptoms several days later. So they find through a combination of hospital records and being able to track where people are and what the method of community transmission appears to have been, to find that being outdoors is actually somewhat protective.
Mhm.
They don't use that language, but I will. I will go ahead and say being outdoors, if you're going to engage with other people at all, is going to be far more protective. So for instance, in Portland, where we live, there is now one, as far as I know, weekly farmers market open. And there's all sorts of alarm that I'm seeing about the idea of farmers market, because farmers markets are obviously often crowded places with lots of people exchanging, money and produce and such.
Liberals go to them, so there's lots of hugging.
And it's far more likely if people are being safe, if people are keeping some distance, but mostly if people are masked, and especially if we can reduce the exchange of actual bills, right? Which is something that happens more at farmers markets than in grocery stores at this point. Very few people pay with cash at a grocery store, but many people, including me, pay with cash at farmers market. The farmers market, controlling for those other factors, is actually likely to be safer. It's likely to be far safer to shop in such a situation. And I will just say that while this paper looked compelling to me, it is consistent with the lead author's results from a paper from 10 years ago, which was called Natural Ventilation for Reducing Airborne Infection in Hospitals, which I think I may have referenced in our very first live stream here, in which he found you want ventilation to decrease pathogen spread, but mechanical ventilation doesn't do anything close to the job of basically opening up windows on either side of a room.
Mm-hmm. So, first of all, I just have to say, how is it that nobody has used routes of transmission? It's a marvelous pun for the title of a paper, and nobody's used it. Routes of transmission. Subways, routes of transmission. I mean, it's right there.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to say this next thing to people. I guess I'm responding in some sense to one comment I happened to catch to our last live stream, which had to do, somebody asserted that beaches have to remain closed because there are no lifeguards to save drowning people. And they then asserted closing beaches is good governance. And on the one hand, I do get it. On the other hand, I think one of the many really important lessons of the COVID-19 disaster is there are no adults. That apparatus that is supposed to be protecting us has failed miserably at so many different levels simultaneously. That means we have to do our own job of protecting ourselves. I do believe in good governance. I really believe it is possible and that it is necessary. But I also must say that to the extent that people fear the nanny state, I think this epidemic is showing us exactly what there is to be feared. The government telling you, don't go out into nature at a point when your instinct might be to do just that. And then the discovery later on that, in fact, that might have even been epidemiologically the right thing to do. This is telling us something important. The fact is, you don't need a lifeguard to enjoy a beach. You don't need a lifeguard to go swimming at the beach. You do need to know what it means to swim at your own risk. And the fact is, this is dangerous. You and I have had incidents in our past where we have nearly drowned as a result of things we didn't understand about the places where we were encountering water. It's not a small matter. On the other hand, if you recognize that beaches existed before lifeguards did, people swam at them. You don't have to go swimming to go to the beach. But if you're going to go to the beach and you feel like you should go swimming, figure out how it is that you enter the water such that you discover the hazard before it gets the better of you.
Yeah, we are living in unprecedented times. It is as if we have all gone to a different nation state with different levels of governance in place. So when I would run study abroad for many years, and we reran our study abroad in 2015-16 to Ecuador for 11 weeks, I and then we would always spend a lot of time in advance talking to the students about the nature of risk, their relationship with risk, and what it means that we are now going to be traveling not only to other people's homes and other people's home countries and homes, but also to places that have not been made safe by lawyers. And this is something that most Americans, most people in WEIRD, again, that acronym, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic countries, most people in weird countries who haven't traveled much can't really grok. They walk around with sidewalks that are perfectly flat and smooth and with everything watched out for them. And when something goes wrong, they think someone else here is to blame. Whereas if you travel widely, or right now, if you want to go to a beach, you should be expected to be able to take the consequences for doing so when there have to be lower safety standards in place.